Right now on Inside Texoma, we are talking about water conservation and how it's affecting you, Texoma. Joining me now is Daniel Nix, the Utilities Operation Manager with the City of Wichita Falls, and we have a lot to talk about. Can you kind of give us a sneak peek or tell us a little bit?
Sure, Ashley. We're going to be talking about our current lake situation, where we are, what our drought stages are, and where we hopefully won't get to, and what you can do to extend those water resources.
It all starts right now on Inside Texoma. I'm Ashley Fitzwater. Thanks for joining us for Inside Texoma. This morning we are talking about the temperatures that are heating up and how they are affecting the lake levels. The lake levels are quickly dropping, which in turn is affecting you, Texoma, and how much water you need to start conserving. And joining me now is Utilities Operation Manager for the City of Wichita Falls, Mr. Daniel Nix. We appreciate you being here today to share and give us an inside look at the water conservation and something that is top of mind for everyone in these triple-digit temperatures with no rain in the forecast, unfortunately. Something interesting we were talking about is comparing where we were last year at this time to now.
Absolutely. Last year at this time we were getting rains through July, and those fell in the right areas, and we actually had lake levels both at Lake Arrowhead and Kickapoo that were above 90%. The simple fact that we've gotten this far into this summer is based on the fact that those lake levels were full at the end of the summer last year.
And that's disappointing because now here we are sitting at, you know, the 60% range, which puts us in the conservation
That's
now.
correct. Stage one.
Stage one. So can we talk a little bit about stage one and just implemented pretty much for our residents and what that means? What does that mean now that we're facing a stage one?
Well, stage one is triggered in our drought plan when the combined lake levels for Arrowhead and Kickapoo reach 60% or lower. That means that we go to the public and ask them to voluntarily conserve water, cut back as much as they can. We provide a public education program to assist them in conservation measures that they may not be aware of. We look at internal to the city things that we can do in the departments to cut back our water usage. It wouldn't make any sense to ask the citizens to do it and the city not to do it itself. Basically it's public education and giving the citizens the opportunity to conserve as much as they can.
And, you know, already, which citizens may or may not know this, you know, we've been really trying to educate the citizens more. I know the city's working with the news outlets to really say, hey, during the hours of 11 to 6, drought or no drought, there are water restrictions in place. So let's kind of start with that and let people know, what are you looking at year-round, all the time, that the city has in place?
Okay. We have 4 restrictions by ordinance that are year-round. The number one restriction that is on everybody's mind is the spray irrigation restriction between the hours of 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. when it's the hottest of the day. And it doesn't matter whether it's January or July, that restriction is in place. It's meant to conserve water through that spray irrigation because studies have shown that when you spray water in the air, and the finer the droplets, the finer the mist, you can get up to 40 to 50% of evaporation. So only half the water is hitting the ground that you're spraying. That increases how much water you have to use. It increases your water bill, and you have to use twice as much water to get the same effect on your lawn. So we have that restriction. It helps you, it helps us. We have another restriction on washing your car at your house. If you're going to do that, you have to have a positive shut-off nozzle on the end of the hose. Basically, when you let go of the hose, the water stops flowing.
Okay.
And the third restriction is for restaurants. 10 years ago when you went to a restaurant, they would just automatically bring you a glass of water.
I do remember that, yes.
And you know now they don't do that.
No.
You have to ask for it. We put a restriction on that 10 years ago. That conserves the water in that if you don't drink it, they just throw it away.
Sure.
Then they have to turn around and wash that glass
Yeah.
that wasn't used. So it's kind of a double whammy on that one. And the restaurants in town have done a fabulous job at that. I don't think I can recall one recently that's just brought me a glass of water. And then the fourth restriction is that if you're putting in a new irrigation system for your house, spray irrigation, it has to be designed by a licensed irrigation professional. And that is meant to take their knowledge and apply it to your irrigation system so when you're using it, you're not wasting water.
Okay. So a lot of tips to keep in mind throughout the year.
Throughout the year, yes.
And, you know, like you said, the sprinklers being one of them, or, you know, the things that people place in their yard to water your yard, something just to keep in mind between those hours. Now, do you pick those hours, meaning because after those hours, the sun's gone down, so or the sun's starting to go down, so it's not going to be as hot and it's more effective? Is that why?
That's true. The heat of the day starts occurring around 11, 12 noon and goes on till about 6, 7 p.m. After that, with the sun going down, getting lower on the horizon, the temperatures do tend to drop off. We recommend if you're going to irrigate, if you have like a programmable irrigation system, that you program it to water after midnight, between midnight and 4 a.m. That's the coolest time of the day.
All right, so good tips there.
Yes.
And you don't have to worry about it because you're asleep. Just go ahead and set
That's
that
right.
if you can. So, and you know, I think that's important. What you want the best, where you're conserving water and helping out the city, and then if you are going to water, you want the best for your lawn as well. So
Exactly.
It's a win-win for all. I know there's so much more to talk about, including, you know, the restrictions that have recently been put into place. We're going to talk about those, but we need to take a quick break. It's something you definitely don't want to miss. We'll be right back with more Inside Texoma. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. We are talking about water conservation and water restrictions that many Texomans are now facing with this drought. It's just an important thing right now that's top of mind to everyone. Joining me again, Mr. Daniel Nix with the City of Wichita Falls. And we talked about some of the restrictions that are in place for residents year-round. Now we're talking about stage one. And really, like you mentioned, it's voluntary, but what are some of the things, or what are some tips that you have for people if they would like to join in and really help conserve water?
Sure. During the summer, most of the water use at your home, 35 to 40%, is on landscape watering. So you can make a big reduction just looking at how you're watering your lawn, how you're keeping your trees and your shrubs watered.
And we were talking during the break a little bit about the grass, and maybe some people have chosen, okay, I'm just going to end the fight, end the battle, and try to keep my yard alive and give up on that. But there are important things to remember if you have trees or maybe shrubs,
Sure.
you know, to try and keep those alive.
The grass tends to go dormant if it gets into an environment it doesn't like, and you can let your lawn go brown. The majority of it will come back in the spring. We're asking people that if you want, let that lawn go brown. Focus your water on shrubs and trees because those are more of an investment. They're harder to replace.
Sure.
It's a little bit cheaper to replace lawn, to reseed or resod certain areas. So we're asking people to pay particular attention only to trees and shrubs during this first stage. The trees, there's a wide variety of trees out there in the system right now, and we encourage people to get with county extension agents, local nurseries, the horticulturalists there and ask them, how much water does this particular tree or this particular shrub need to keep it alive? And that way you can apply just the right amount.
Sure.
And you don't overwater.
Good advice, good advice. Something else, you know, we're talking about stage 1. Stage 2, though, not out of the question, especially with the forecast looking the way it is of us going into. When do you anticipate stage 2, and what is stage 2?
Our current projections using the last 4 or 5 weeks worth of data from the lakes indicate that we could hit stage 2 drought restrictions sometime in late September, early October. And that's if we don't get any significant rainfall in the near future. I'm holding hope.
Sure, we all are. Yes.
Now, stage 2 is a dramatic change in drought planning. Stage 2 in Wichita Falls is mandatory restrictions. We will restrict the amount of water that you use for irrigation to once a week. We will mail everybody a letter describing the current situation and a map of the city detailing which day of the week you can water. We will deploy what we call in the city water cops, and they will drive around all week long, all hours of the night, looking for people that are irrigating off their day, and they will issue citations. Those citations go to municipal court, and they are fined just like any other misdemeanor fine in the city of Wichita Falls. We also step up our public education campaign. We get more information out. We try and do more things like Inside Texoma to educate the public. We look at restricting water with Parks Department, firefighting. We actually shut down certain things in the city, like fire hydrant flushing, cleaning sewer lines unless it's an emergency. Those type of things that use a large amount of water, those actually get shut down in stage 2.
Now, I know a lot of people enjoy places like the water park to cool off, or if they don't have a pool, maybe that's their only place to go to cool off. But is that something that would be affected now that it's, you know, city property basically?
During stage 2, it would not be affected. The water park really does not use that much water because they have filtration systems in place. They're always recycling that water over and over and over, cleaning it up, putting it back into the park. So they're just using water to top off what they've lost due to the small amount of evaporation they may experience. You really don't see us shutting down recreational type activities until you get to stage 3.
And unfortunately, stage 3 has happened in Wichita Falls before, correct?
Yes.
Only once, though, so we're hoping this is not a second time. We don't want to add to that record there, but what is stage 3 exactly?
Stage 3 is what we call a drought emergency. The lake levels have dropped to 40%. We have less than half the water that the lakes are capable of holding. Now, stage 3, we look at some very draconian things. We start looking at restricting businesses on how much water they can use, shutting down recreational. We really focus on the immediate needs, health, safety, and protection. So we will try to produce enough water to keep you healthy and to conduct sanitary needs. And trying to keep the businesses going, but we ask them to look at their internal operations during stage 3. And the goal for stage 3 is to reduce the overall water production by 35%.
Wow. Do you see us getting to that?
I've gone through this once before, 11 years ago. It is not beyond the realm of possibility. Now, I hope that in the next 12 months we can get some significant rain and bring us back up above 60%. But everything's a cycle in nature, so we're probably just cycling back around to a dry period, and we'll come out of it eventually. It's just how long can we extend our water resources to get to that next rain.
Now, something that a lot of people might wonder is, okay, let's say we get a downpour. Let's say miraculously it rains for 5 days straight. Those lake levels start going back up. What does the city do so we're not going in and out of a water restriction?
There is a provision in the ordinance that says that the Director of Public Works and the City Council look at that long-range forecast, and if we get a downpour that bumps us back up above 60%, but it's only 61,
sure,
and there's nothing in the long-range forecast, they will not take us off a restriction. It has to be a significant increase, and the forecast has to show that this is an ongoing trend and that we're going to continue to get rain.
So there's not a magical number, though, is there? I mean, like 62, 63, we're out. It's basically the number plus the forecast, correct?
Exactly.
It's a
There's
double
several
thing.
factors that they take into account.
All right. Well, something I know everyone's going to be keeping their eyes on, and stage 2, you know, hopefully that'll be the only other stage we have to go to.
Yes.
But I know you'll definitely help keep us informed, and all you have to do is keep it tuned to News Channel 6 for the very latest. We're going to take a look, though, at how they're monitoring those lakes and just how they come up with 60%. That's after the break right here on Inside Texoma. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. We appreciate Mr. Daniel Nix with the City of Wichita Falls really giving us an inside look at water conservation, and we're learning a lot today and how this drought is really affecting us here in Texoma and specifically Wichita Falls. Now, one thing I forgot to ask you about was stage 4, which was actually put into place not that long ago and could be another stage that I hope we don't ever have to reach. But what is stage 4?
Well, out of the drought in 1999 and 2000, when the lake levels got to 33%, we realized that stage 3 might not be enough. So in 2000, or 2008, when we rewrote our drought plan, we implemented what is known as a stage 4 drought disaster. And at that stage, we're basically restricting the citizens of Wichita Falls to a 10 million gallon per day volume of water. So we're not looking at a percent reduction. It's 10 million gallons of water a day is all you get.
Wow. So what does that mean? I mean, is the water shut off after they reach that, or what happens?
You're looking at, we have the possibility of pulling irrigation meters to stop people from irrigating. Looking at what do you do in January to use water, because in January and February the citizens of Wichita Falls typically use between 10 and 12 million gallons of water a day. So we would ask citizens to go back and see what you were doing in January, and if you weren't doing it in January, don't do it now.
Sure.
And that should keep us in that 10 to 12 million gallon per day production range.
So basically, whatever you're doing in the winter, when it's cold outside, you're not worrying about your lawn, you're not worrying about anything
That's
outdoors,
right.
Just anything inside your home, basically, that
Exactly.
you're needing the water for.
And at that point, we're just trying to keep you alive.
Yeah.
If it's in the big middle of July and we've got a lot of evaporation, at stage 4, you may only have 90 to 110 days worth of water left in lakes.
Wow. What do you do? Is that extra pressure? Because there's the other cities that rely on Wichita Falls for their water as well. So is that extra pressure on the city to really monitor those levels and watch those? Because so many people are depending upon the water.
Wichita Falls has become a regional water supply, and there is a lot of pressure to manage those resources properly, and that's why you see us acting at 60% and not getting down to 50 or 40% before we pull a trigger like some cities do.
How is that 60% determined? I mean, is that something from the state? Is that something city councilors came up with? Is that who decided the number 60% to start taking action?
Sure, it's not determined by the state or the city council. The city council has a water resources committee that is formed by partners in the water industry here in Wichita Falls, and that committee looks at putting this plan together. They look at, do we want to trigger at 60 or 50, and they compare all of that data, and they are the ones that suggest to the council that this plan be adopted, and we've set the first trigger at 60%.
But there's no law as far as each city has to start taking action when their lakes hit this level.
That's correct. I
Okay.
mean, the city could set it at 70% if they wanted to.
Is that something, you know, looking at the drought and the stuff that we're seeing this year, if maybe this continues, do you ever see that number going up?
It's possible. Through any drought, we will evaluate what we did,
Sure.
kind of an after-action report. If we saw that the trigger at 60% was ineffective, then we will go back when we revise the plan in 2012, and we will bump those triggers up to a different level. It may be 70%, maybe 75%.
Sure.
But if we get through this drought, triggering at 60,
Probably keep it the same.
we'll probably keep it the same.
Is that something that's reviewed every year then? Or is it every?
It's only updated every 5 years.
Okay, so it's going to happen to fall on a good time then, huh?
Yes.
For them to look at it and review it.
Exactly.
So, very interesting. Well, I know we talked about how you determine those lake levels. It's something that's very interesting, and I promise right after this break we're going to talk to Mr. Nix about that. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are talking water conservation, and something interesting is we're hearing a lot about the numbers, 60% stage 1, you know, and then so forth for the other stages. How do you come up with that 60%? I know is what a lot of people want to know.
Well, we go out to the lakes daily, and there is a gauge that we actually lower down off of the intake structure. That's a USGS gauge provided by the Department of Interior. And we check that level, and then we use that in our calculations to determine how much volume is in that lake.
And you also measure, there's two different ways that you compare the readings,
That's
correct?
correct. The USGS has an ultrasonic probe, and they're measuring it constantly, and it reports via satellite to the USGS site every hour. And if I need a quick calculation, I'll use their number from their website. And then just to check and make sure that value is valid, I'll use our hard reading that we took every day and make sure that the values are valid.
That's interesting. A daily chore then to go out. Is that
Yes.
every single day, like Saturdays and Sundays as well?
We do
or?
Saturdays and Sundays as well.
Wow, constantly keeping up with the lake levels then. How long does that take?
To get to all of the lakes that we are in charge of, it takes about 4 hours.
Wow, to go out there and, is it a hard process, a long process?
No, it's the device is actually mounted on top of the intake structure, and they go out. It's a weight on a cable, and they lower it down, and it has a reading bar that you can get an elevation based on how far down that probe went to hit the surface of the water. And so you can get a elevation of water above mean sea level, and that's what we use to calculate how much water's in that lake.
And then you come up with the calculations of 60% full or 50% full.
That's right. We've done volume studies with the Texas Water Development Board, and so we know at what level how much water's in that lake, and so it's just a matter of simple division.
Yeah.
Very interesting, and something I know you're keeping an eye on. And something else, though, I quickly wanted to go back to that we were talking about in the 1999 and the 2000 drought about those changes that were, you know, put into place. But what, compared to where we are now, the months are, you know, you mentioned this at the very beginning of the show, but compared to where we are now, it took a full year, though, for those levels to go down, correct?
That's correct. We saw our first trigger during the 1999-2000 drought in September of 1999. And we did not get down to the 33% level, which is the lowest we got, until September of 2000. And in October of 2000, November of 2000, and December of 2000, we had 3 record rainfall months in a row. And that brought the lake levels back up to, I think, in the 80% range.
Oh, that's great. But that's something I thought was interesting and something to keep in mind, that although we're falling now, it could even affect us, you know, in the long range. It could take a long time, I guess, for us to basically get to that point, correct?
Correct. As the evaporation rates go down in the winter, we'll see more water being retained in the lakes, and it may be this time next year before we even get to a stage 3 or 4. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not is right. Well, thank you so much for giving us this inside look and keeping us on top of it. Of course, you can always stay tuned to News Channel 6 for much more on these stages and how they will affect you. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you back here next Sunday morning for another look inside Texoma.